Clock is a little fast in the back.
Yeah, I go by the.
All right, we are good to go on my end.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the September 14th, 2022 Henrietta Town Board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek.
Here.
Councilmember Bolsner.
Here.
Councilmember Page.
Here.
Councilmember Belanca.
Here.
Supervisor Schultz.
Here. We'll begin the meeting with a silent prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the preceding meeting?
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the August 24th, 2022 town board meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek.
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner.
Aye.
Councilmember Page.
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. First up, we have special use permit applications number 2022-008 and 011. Southridge Landing, East Henrietta Road, to apply split zoning to the parcel such that the parcel can be utilized for commercial B2 purposes, which is special use permit 008, and to construct an apartment building, which is application 011. Go ahead. Be at the microphone. And I think, I don't know about, do you guys need to see the presentation, or Becky, do we have it electronically?
I have the site plans.
Which site plan version are we looking at? Because there's so many different versions. I'm not entirely sure which one I'm looking at.
The most recent one is what you have in the OneDrive.
I think it's version 5. Is that right?
Yep. Version 5, is that what we're looking at? Okay, thank you.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Joshua Saxton. I'm a civil engineer at Passer Associates. Here for the special use permit meeting for today. This isn't the first meeting, but I'll go back to the beginning since it has been a little while since we have been here to discuss this project. So this project originally came toward the town board months ago with our initial site design. There was a lot of public as well as board comments regarding a lot of things: access, berming, where the building's located, proximity to the surrounding residents. So, there was a lot of comments to take into account with that site plan. So we redesigned the site, kind of similar to this revision 5 now, but there were some additional concerns still, even though we did rotate the building around so the back of the building isn't facing the single family residence, as well as removing the access off of Calkins Road. The main concern after those revisions was fire access. This was mainly since there was a dead end at the end of the driveway along the southern side of the building. There was concern that this would cause issues in case of an emergency. Trucks wouldn't be able to access the site, or if they were, they would be stuck if a vehicle were to park in the roads and basically cause issues of them not being able to circle back out. Since that discussion, we have gone back and looked at that to redesign it. Our solution for that concern was actually having 360 degrees access across the whole building. This is done by basically a western fire lane along the western side of the building that not only solves the circulation issue, but also provides access throughout the whole building in case of an emergency. So I don't know if there's any other additional questions. The only other kind of change since I think the last site plan that you guys have seen is we did remove some of the additional pavement that we had proposed. That was mainly for circulating through the site, but now with this access road along the western side of the building, we don't need that extra pavement since emergency vehicles will be able to basically circulate through the site as needed. So other than that, the only other site change, we added the sidewalk along the access road going up to the intersection at East Henrietta Road. That's just for residents if they need to go to Wegmans or CVS or any of those lots, they can utilize that sidewalk if they don't have a car to traverse Henrietta. So if there's any other questions that the board has, I am here to answer them.
So at the meeting with the town, when the fire marshal and fire chief were reviewing, there was some talk about possibly swapping the outdoor area to the essentially kitty corner on the lot. Did that decide not to happen, or?
I think that'll if it's not on the plans now, but it's definitely something that's open and that'll be taken into account during site plan review.
Right.
If we get to that point. It just didn't make it on this plan, but it's definitely something we're considering. So
just I believe the fire marshal and fire chief just had some potential concern about kids crossing that portion of the parking lots.
It will be gated with crash gates, so it won't be accessible.
No, I'm not talking about the closed. That's why they were okay with it. Where it's currently located, they essentially have to cross the main entrance parking lot. So
okay.
But like you said, that's really more of a site plan issue, but I was just curious if there was any resolution in that regards. Questions from the board?
In addition to the parking lot crossing for the children, isn't the fire marshal still standing by his decision for a second entrance? I didn't see any leniency on that behalf.
There's a new.
There is a new
set of
right.
There's a new one?
Yeah. So Rick, in terms of there's arguably a second entrance since they can come in off of Calkins Road to get up to that intersection. So if East Henrietta Road is blocked, they can get to that entrance road through CVS. But obviously there's one stretch that pathway down that there's only a single path. From a code standpoint, it doesn't actually require, because it's a sprinklered building, it doesn't require two completely independent entrances. The issue that the previous fire marshal had and the new fire marshal agreed with was that with the old design, because there was no loop there was no second exit. If an emergency vehicle came in and then let's say an ambulance came in and then a fire truck comes in, puts out its stabilizers, lifts the ladder to get up to the roof, that ambulance has no way now to get out past that fire truck. So by providing the second access out, they do provide it. And if you look at whereas there is that small section of singularity, I don't know what else you want to call it, but there are no buildings along there. There's no reason why any of the emergency vehicles would stop there. And one of the things that it needs to be clearly marked that there's no parking along that road. That's obviously a fire lane. So
yep.
Does that make sense? Yep. Yeah, that came out. That's the meeting I was referring to, that they came in. That we not only had the fire marshal there, but we had the fire chief from Henrietta Fire District, since obviously they're the ones who'd be responding to the call. So, but that was, again, that was done at the town prior to them coming back here. So obviously, if he couldn't get the fire marshal signing off on this plan, it wouldn't come back here before the town board. So, other questions from the town board? Are there any questions from the public? Okay, could you do me a favor and move over to sit at the seat so that you can answer questions if they have them. And then a person who wishes to come up, yep, go ahead, come on up. Just introduce yourself and ask your question.
I didn't catch quite all that. There is going to be a second emergency exit for an ambulance and so forth.
So again, there's basically that along the west path, and you can see it, it's in that darker shade. That is for emergency vehicle use only, and it provides a second exit from the parking lots. However, it does meet back up with the original entrance up there. When you get out to East Henrietta Road, that comes into a T intersection. One of the entrances, the main entrance goes out to East Henrietta Road, but the other leg of that road loops around through the CVS, and it's the CVS entrance out onto Calkins Road. So again, if there were an incident that blocked East Henrietta Road, emergency vehicles could still get into the CVS parking lot.
Okay, and CVS parking. Okay, up on top, right?
Pardon?
Up on top.
Again, so the main entrance is the one on top at the top of the hill on East Henrietta Road. The secondary access is the one at the bottom of the hill off of Calkins Road.
There would be access to that road between the daycare center and.
Correct. That's.
Would that be open all the time, or?
It's currently open all the time. It's CVS's entrance to their parking lot.
Yeah, I know CVS. You can get up to CVS. You can get to. But would there also be an access road to the apartment there?
No. Again, you would drive up and around the top. The access road is up at the top. CVS, unfortunately, was not willing to provide an access road out directly. So it essentially
another road coming out to Calkins Road then, right?
They're not from this development, but because it connects back in that second emergency exit connects back into the same loop road that goes out through CVS. Essentially, emergency vehicles, if necessary, could go out that way.
I know one of the problems when you come over the hill going east on Calkins Road, there's no really turning lane to get into any of those.
Which, if you remember, well, I don't know if you were here or not, but in the original plan, we objected to that entrance that was going to come out the east side of the playground for two reasons. One, we thought it created a dangerous traffic situation with 3 exits there. The second thing, it would have required to essentially clear out all the trees that provide the buffer between the existing houses. So now they're not going to be disturbing those trees at all. They're not going to be disturbing those trees at all. Again, would we have preferred an entrance out through CVS? Absolutely. But it's not, unfortunately, they wouldn't offer it. In fact, to be honest, I'd have rather had that be a common entrance, just like the one on East Henrietta Road is, so that the daycare would have also exited there. I don't like having those 2 commercial driveways next to each other at the bottom of the hill, but unfortunately that one's already in place. So there's nothing I can do about it, but we can prevent a third one from going in. So.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Before you walk away, would I be able to get that person's name for the record?
Richard Wallace, 24 Hartwood Drive.
Yeah, just name's fine. Lois?
I just want to get some clarification. So this is for B2 too. We're changing to a B2 as well, or adding a B2. Is that correct?
So this lot is a combination of B2. I think there's some B1, but I'm not, maybe it's just B2 with specifics, and R215. So the lot is a split zone. And so under the rules, if you want,
it's B2 with specifics, B2 and R115.
Yeah. So under the zoning rules, if you want to build the entire lot to one of those zones, you first have to you essentially have to say, I want to use the rules from the one of the, in this case, 3 zones to apply to the entire parcel. It's not exactly a rezone. It's just saying, I'm going to apply the rules, build it to B2, because again, the problem is that you can't have, for instance, you know, you can't have the mixed uses on the same parcel, even though it's the parcel itself has 3 different zoning districts covering it.
And this is primarily, I think I saw your last presentation. It's primarily a apartment building, right?
Correct.
And so it needs to be a B2 to be apartment building?
It's not right. So apartment buildings are allowed in B2. They are not allowed in R115, which is single family only.
And that's what it's zoned for right now.
It is zoned for both either B2 or residential 115. Both zones cover this parcel.
Is there a reason why you chose B2 to come in?
For B2, that's.
Actually, you have to address the questions up here. So what was your question? Well, it does, that's.
So what was the reason why we went with B2 rather than the R?
What do you mean went with B2? B2 was always there.
Okay, so.
That's not changing.
Well, he could do the apartment building in a B2. So why are we doing a double? So.
Again, if you're going to use one of the districts for the whole parcel, that has to be approved by a special use permit. That's the first thing. That just basically says, because we need them to declare, because then once they do that, they can't build anything on the parcel that's to the R115. It basically locks them into, they have to make a choice, and they're choosing to develop to the B2. So that's the first thing they're going to do. Now, some of the things we look at that is there are restrictions on that B2, on a portion of that B2. So as part of the special use permit, we're going to make a determination as to which of those specific restrictions still apply and which of them don't. Because some make sense, some don't make a whole lot of sense. So again, that to do that, there has to be a legislative decision, which is why we made it a special use permit. Okay. Once they've done that, then they're basically in the B2 zone to build an apartment complex. I need a special use permit to build an apartment complex. If it were a use that didn't require a special use permit, they'd have just gotten the split zoning special use permit. They wouldn't need the second one.
Okay, is there any, since I can't ask him, could you ask him if he has any plans to put any kind of a medical building?
Okay, I will check them. But to be honest, just so you're clear, he can, if they can. Now, like I said, they're getting this special use permit. Can we put a restriction on that potentially? But if they get rid of the split zoning on any portion of the B2 parcel, they could absolutely put in a medical building.
And that's why I'm objecting.
Well,
I don't.
You can object all you want. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I'm David Frink. And so has the special use permit been approved?
No special use permit has been approved. We have no intention of improving it tonight. We want to hear the feedback, and we have to complete the seeker process. So town neighbors have heard the earlier plans. As you heard, this is revision 5. We keep sending them back to make improvements to mitigate the issues brought up by residents. We want to make sure there's none left. You know, with simpler projects, we can often create those 9 factors ahead of time. For stuff like this, we often need to hear the remaining comments. So
thank you for hearing us.
Yep.
Second thing, the second exit is actually through CVS. So that's actually through private property. That's acceptable.
So again, it's not technically a second exit. It is a second means of egress for emergency vehicles. But
Okay.
yes, emergency vehicles can drive through that parking lot. It's not, again, it's not intended to be just like that Western emergency access is for emergency access vehicles only. It's going to have a crash gate. The fire department has a key to open it. But that's for emergency access only. That is allowed for emergency access vehicles.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's been the discussion about the subsidized facility, that my understanding would include support for those who are chemically dependent, addictions such as that. No, but the relationship of that with a daycare facility.
One, I've not heard of any of that substance dependency. I guess my question is, what prevents the people in the houses? If there's a substance dependent person living on that street, what prevents them from going right next door to the daycare?
It's a matter of quantity of people and process, but so there's been no discussion about the juxtaposition of the two properties.
There has been no discussion that there are going to be a bunch of drug-addled people living in this apartment, no.
And how about, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names. Could you, is there any type of subsidy involved with this particular one? I think there was something for area mean income. Is that correct?
I think so, yes. Angela from Dakota.
He was asking the person who can better answer the question to come up and answer it.
So Angela Eichholz with Dakota Partners.
You can pull that microphone
Yeah,
down.
pull it down. I can't hear you.
Your name, please.
Angela Eichholz with Dakota Partners. It is our intent to pay for this project in part with low-income housing tax credits. Would be targeting workforce, so the working population.
Excuse me, you're very hard to hear.
Yeah, can
Pull the
you
mic
take-
closer.
Yeah, we can't hear you at all.
It is our intent to use low-income housing tax credits as part of the project's capital stack. This will be a workforce housing project. So our main target resident are people in the area. It'll be income dependent.
So it's percentage of area mean income typically is if they're below a particular percentage, they get a reduction of the rent, that type of thing.
Correct.
I know that the apartments are not specifically targeted towards seniors or individuals with disabilities, but do you anticipate that there might be individuals who are seniors and are looking for low income housing to use this type of apartment?
Certainly, it's open to anyone, so seniors are welcome to apply.
Okay. Any other questions with regards to the type of housing? And you have other examples of this? You guys have done other projects?
Yes. We can provide some examples if that's something that would be helpful.
I think so.
That would
It'd
be
good
great.
for the board. Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank
How
you.
many units are going to be there? I know you told us this and I apologize. I don't remember. How many units?
62.
62.
And it's 2 floors?
I thought it was switched to 3 when they
3
shrunk the
floors?
building down to
Okay.
pull it away from the adjacent houses.
Yeah, because that was the need for basically reducing it down. It was the building size needed to get larger to
Right.
account for the reduction in the footprint of the building.
However, it was still under the limit, the height limit for
Yeah,
it.
so
So
we wouldn't need
commercial
a-
B2, so
yeah.
you don't need a special use permit for
Yep.
that. Yeah.
And with the emergency vehicle access road going behind the apartment complex, is there any emergency exit doors out that way or anything as well, so that if needed, fire can get in that way?
I mean, certainly I think that'll come more in the site design and when the building gets fully designed out. But definitely something that's possible to make sure we're meeting code for emergency access for the building.
So there might not have been on the initial plans because originally there with the grade that was going to be partially a not fully exposed story. So again, they added the on the site plan portion, they added the access road. I don't know that they went back and updated the floor plan accordingly, because again, that typically doesn't happen until you get to the planning board stage.
Are you going to be applying for any commuter grants?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Are you going to be applying for any commuter? Anything through commuter since you're doing affordable housing?
I do not believe so, no.
I'm sorry.
No. We would be looking to receive a pilot for the project, but I don't believe that would go through Comida.
There's a shelter rent type pilot that's typical for either, again, the subsidized, area mean income housing and or, affordable senior housing, affordable housing in general. It's also available to student housing for some reason. Any other questions? Thank you. Is there someone else in the audience who has questions? Okay, coming up. Hold on.
I'm Joanne Thayer, and they're not touching because the road's not going back there. But now if it becomes their property, can they clean it up and take the dead trees away and clean it up? Because now you're putting another kind of road back there. So now I'm going to have more water coming down Calkins Road.
Just so you know, one of the requirements, well, I don't think they're doing any disturbance within 150 feet of Calkins Road. However, with that said, one of the requirements we already identified as part of the seeker process is that they're going to have to improve the drainage. So there'll actually be less water going to the houses on Thompson than there is.
Yeah, because I get puddles behind my house when it rains and it never dries up because it's overbushed. I have dead trees back there and everything. So if it becomes their property, can they clean it up while they're doing the other work?
They can.
And make it look presentable?
They can.
And I would even keep it more presentable too.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted that to know because as I say, I've got the most water than any of them on the street. And I know the house next to me could care less.
Right.
Okay. But I've been there for so long. It takes me I mow back there. So it takes me forever in the spring to mow because I'm squeezing mud out of them. I just want to bring it forward. So I will get the dead tree, make the town look pretty. See, if you accept this, why not make the whole area look nice?
Yeah, just so you know, there is a conservation committee who specifically looks and makes recommendations specifically about that type of stuff. Okay. The one thing I will caution is because they're not disturbing anything east of the daycare, I'm not sure. It's possible when they put in their drainage that goes into that pond that it'll draw some of the water away from there, but I'm not sure. So if you're one of the first couple houses in,
I'm the second one in.
Yeah, I'm not 100% positive how much they'll be able to affect that drainage since they're not disturbing that area at all.
They could just clean out the dead shrubs and clean it up, maybe put a little grass seed around, and especially the house on the corner has never taken care of it. So
Also, if it does go through, it would be wise of you to attend the planning board meeting and share your thoughts because they're very attentive to those kinds of things.
Okay. I've been to so many meetings. I don't know.
I know.
I don't know which one is
if
which.
You want to send an email to supervisor@henrietta.org, I can make sure you get that agenda.
I get that. Well, I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hirsch.
I apologize for getting here late today. My name is Mr. Hirsch. The only question I had is, I know where CVS is because I don't live too far from there. Where is there going to be room to put an apartment complex behind there? I've never been behind there, but from what I can tell, they've got the parking lot in the front and you go behind there and there's nothing behind there. I mean, how are they going to fit an apartment building back there?
Look at the plans.
Look at the plans. Well, I can read a blueprint, but that's besides.
Okay.
I mean, can you tell me what's back there? I mean, how many square feet are back there? Is there room to actually put something like
290,000 square feet roughly?
And that's not going to interfere with the rear of CVS at all?
Nope.
Because people go through a drive-in window and all that?
Nope.
Okay.
It doesn't, it's not actually even immediately adjacent to the CVS parcel itself. Any other questions coming up?
Hi there. Mickey Gonchi Wood. I did not make the second meeting. I was here at the first meeting. The question was very direct when we asked, was there going to be any subsidized housing in this apartment complex? And we got a very definitive no. What changed?
I can't necessarily address that. To my knowledge, this was always one that was for people below the area mean income. Someone asked, is it Section 8 housing specifically? That was the answer. I do remember that being asked, and that being said, no, that this is, again, it's the working, we'll call it the working poor, for lack of a better term. And that part of the reason for this site selection is because it is on the main bus route. A lot of these individuals need to use public transportation because they can't afford cars. But in terms of, some of the other types of housing that was discussed, it's not that. It's, again, there's typically a schedule that says if you're at, and I'm just making numbers up, if you're at 80% of the area mean income, you get 20%, 25% reduction on the rent rate. If you're below 60% of the area mean income, you get 40% reduction of rent.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
It is still a 3-story.
Correct.
Okay. I'm happy to hear the entrance is not coming out on Calkins. I was fortunate enough to work remotely today.
Right.
And as I was walking out my front door, looking at my newly installed garden, I was hearing car brakes because the school buses are out. Normally I am running out because we have fender benders, but obviously this morning cars were coming over the hill and slamming on their brakes because, the buses were there. And usually in the morning when I go out, I'm in the jam all the traffic going into the daycare because I'm right on Calkins.
Right.
We ended up putting a turnaround in, I think, when Marketplace was installed because we can't get in and out of our driveway because we're like smack center of that hill.
Yeah, we definitely, when that was brought up by residents, we all looked at it and agreed with the residents that it would just be too dangerous to have an exit there.
Okay, I thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
I missed Mr. Hirsch again. I missed the first one, but is this low income housing or is this basically for people that might be senior citizens that are they're on a fixed income and therefore you mentioned about 60% below the mean of 40%?
So again, it's market rate, which just means it's open to anybody.
Oh, okay.
However, they have a program, and again, we have others of these in town. They have a program where if you're below a particular level of the area mean income, you get a discount on your rate. That can be whether you're senior, whether you're working poor, whatever.
Okay.
We're not talking about people with zero income, or else they're not going to be able to afford even the
right. And this is not a Section 8 facility, right?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, as I mentioned, that we talked about at the workshop that we were going to have to take time to factor in any additional discussion tonight. And in the next 2 weeks, we'll write up the seeker determination and approve / deny resolution. So it'll be on the agenda for the next meeting. Does anyone feel we need to keep the public hearing open? Obviously, if there's any additional feedback on the resolution itself, they can do it. Lois?
Right, so for tonight, are you approving the B2 section? Is that what you're doing?
We are not.
The zoning? The zoning.
We are not. We're not
This is
approving
strictly
anything.
for the bid. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Does anyone feel we need to keep it open? Okay, so hearing no objections, I'm going to close the public hearing for the special use permit applications number 2022-008011 South Ridge Landing. And as I said, you'll be on the agenda for the next meeting to regards to that. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
For answering questions. We'll note that special use permit application number 2022-038, which is GS1 by Energy Materials Corporation, FSI 5500 LLC, also known as the former Delphi property. That application was postponed by the applicant. I believe they're working some details out with the tenants. So, but just in case there's somebody who did show up who wishes to provide input on that particular decision, I keep it on the agenda just in case someone wants to talk about it. So anyone who wishes to talk about that particular project? Technically the public hearing, it didn't happen. So, but I just, like I said, I'd like to give people a chance to talk about it. Next up, we have a public hearing on the proposed local law to amend the Henrietta zoning code with respect to special use permits, including application filing. So as discussed last meeting, there are two issues that we saw in the special use permit section of the code. One is that there is a section of code that requires that any building, any application for a new project within a certain distance of an education or religious facility needs a special use permit, even if code doesn't otherwise require one. The problem was it had this ambiguous special use permit requirement. I don't even remember what it was. It was very generic title. And I don't think a lot of people even were aware that it was there. So we want to rename the title so that it really pops out at you as what it's for. And then the second portion.
The title was special use permit uses.
Yeah, right. Couldn't get much more generic than that. So the second thing was there's a section of code that requires a 30-day delay between the receipt of the application and the first public hearing. There is already a delay on action, but this town board has on multiple occasions had an early public hearing so that we can get some of the feedback from the residents early on, get it back to the developer, see if they can make changes to mitigate the issues being raised by the residents, so that there can be at least one or two cycles of public hearings before a decision is made. This particular project, I think we're on 3 or 4. So the problem is you can't, with that section of code, we were technically in violation on some of those because we were holding the public hearing before the 30 days had expired. So we went and looked at what length of days makes more sense. There was some discussion about eliminating the time delay altogether. I had said that I believe that time delay was in there for the purpose of giving residents time to look at the application. So we looked at the schedule, and the application has to be in 33 days prior to the meeting at which it's going to be the first meeting at which it can be acted upon. Normally we have 2-week gap between meetings, which would mean that it could be, the public hearing could be as early as day 19. However, in the summer, we have a 3-week gap between meetings. And so not wanting to block that out, that's where the 12 came from. It's basically 33 minus 21, it's 12 days. The feeling was that was a good compromise to give the residents 12 days to review the application and to provide feedback. And again, even if they need to then speak about something, learn something else, and then come back with additional questions, they would still have 21 more days if it's in the summer, or 14 more days if it's in the rest of the year to review and do further research before a decision can actually be made. So that's what we're looking to change the law to. Comments from the town board? Comments from the public? Come on up. Tell us.
All right. As I mentioned before last time, and I know you remember, that I'm not in favor of it because the public hearing is for the people. It's for me. It's for us to be able to come down and prepare and give our statements, and hopefully they're intelligent based on the data that is required with the application. And just to clarify some things, because there seems to be some misunderstanding. First of all, I don't understand where you got that seeker thing, because the seeker thing, you said that that you had the town board finds it useful to have the public hearing before the full 30-day seeker process. So when I look that up, what I find is the 30-day seeker process the only thing you're doing during that first 30 days is to determine who the lead agency is. You don't need a public hearing for that. You don't need the public's opinion for that. I'm reading right here off of the DEC's process.
Right, but so in reality, yes, we cannot take lead agency until we either hear back from the agencies that no one else is interested. So it can be less than 30 days. It could be 1 day if every agency got back to us in 1 day and said, I have no problem with you being lead agency. In reality, that doesn't happen. What usually happens, they don't respond, or if they respond at all, they respond on day 30. During that time, right, we go out and look at the site. We go out and gather information. During that entire time, we are still gathering information, because if nothing else, we are an involved agency. So let's say someone else challenges us and takes lead agency, we would still be an involved agency. We would still provide input to that seeker process. So there's nothing that says during those 30 days while you're waiting for lead agency, you need to twiddle your thumbs and not do anything. We can absolutely do research, and we can absolutely gather input from the public.
And I wasn't indicating that you wouldn't be doing anything. I'm just saying that the requirement is only to determine who the lead agency is for those 30 days. The 30 days you're asking me to give up so that for some reason, which I don't understand still, is that I can't, you're telling me that I wouldn't be able to have the whole 30 days to prepare for a meeting because of this seeker thing. And the seeker thing is only saying at the end of the 30 days, all you need to have to determine was the lead. I'm reading this right off of your document.
You're twisting what I've said. No. You still have 30 days, so show up at the second meeting.
There's no, your comment was that, and the attorney corrected it, because you have the authority to continue on with the hearing. I don't get that determination. I don't get to say after the 12th day that we had the public hearing. I don't get to say that we're going to go on and we're going to have a second hearing. Are you putting that in the code, that there is a guaranteed second hearing within 30 days?
Until the decision is made on that particular one, we typically have that.
And you get to decide whether you want it in the 12 days, the 13th day, the 14th day, the 15th day, or the 62, because you actually have 62 days before you make a determination, not a 30-day. You get 62 days to make a determination.
Lois, I know how the rules work. Well, then
let's go by the rules. You're asking me to give up time. Okay, so let's look at
the 30 days, just to be clear, lead agency is only required. So if you're going to go full seeker, that's only required on a coordinated action. On a non-coordinated action, there isn't a 30-day wait period.
Yeah, you still have to, I agree, but you're going beyond the point of the 30-day now because and
it's 33 days, just to be clear. It's 33 days is when our submission deadline is ahead.
Okay, all your documents say 30 days, 62 days, and 62 days beyond that after the hearing. And actually, I misspoke, because you have 62 days to have the hearing.
Correct.
And an additional 62 days to make a decision. That's 124 days. And you're asking me to be prepared and everything within within 12 days. And I'm asking why. Why are you guys asking me to be prepared? If I have to go away on vacation and I don't have the ability to come into this office to determine what's on the board, what's been submitted within 12 days ahead of time, so that you're saying every 12 days I have to be prepared to be in here to know what's on the agenda. And that is so improper, so incorrect.
Or you can, well, so a couple things. First, find me where in the seeker laws it requires a 30-day wait other than lead agency.
There is no seeker law.
Right.
Don't
so the point is the 30 days is a town rule, not a seeker rule, right? Do you agree?
You have two rules. You have a seeker rule that says in 30 days, the only thing that is required within 30 days is that
coordinated review only.
It's for the leader agency. Correct. To be determined.
That's and to be clear, that is a maximum, not a minimum.
Yeah, but that doesn't require the public at all. So it doesn't make any difference whether it's
okay. So then why are you bringing it up?
I'm bringing it up because you're using it as an excuse as to why I only get 12 days.
I am not using it as an excuse. I'm not. I said, when we do seeker, irrespective of lead agency, right? We have to make a seeker determination. We like to get feedback from the residents. We also have to make special use permit decisions often, right? And in this case, since it's specifically for a special use permit, we absolutely have to, right? And so that calendar is 33 days from the submission. Okay. We want to have
wait.
Let me finish.
I'm asking for clarification. So the 30 days, you're trying to tell me the 30 days that you have to do what? What is your full requirement for 30 days?
None.
Exactly.
Right.
Well,
so why
except for to have the leader agency. So there's still no reason. Well, you do. You have to have a leader agent for your
only if it is a coordinated review, and it does not. That is a maximum of 30 days, not a minimum.
I agree.
So in day 12, we could be lead agent.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you can have that lead agent anywhere, anytime up to that 30 days.
Correct. And again, for a non-coordinated review, there is no lead agents to delay. So again, this is a moot point. I don't understand it.
It's not a moot point, sir. The fact of the matter is you're asking me to go down to 12 days for absolutely no reason. Absolutely none.
There is a reason, because we want to have input from the public ahead of time.
But this isn't about you.
Okay.
The public hearing is about the public. That's why it's called a public hearing.
Right.
Again, I will reiterate, if I'm on vacation and I'm not down here in due diligence to come down and see exactly what's on there, I will miss my ability to prepare for this.
Supervisor, if I can jump in.
Well, I just want to say one thing. So one of the things you can do is sign up for a notice. And when the applications come in, the thing is advertised, you will get a notice.
That's 5 days. It requires me to come in to determine. And today
it doesn't. It's online.
Yeah, and within the 5 days. It's scary. I called in.
Wait. What do you mean you have to come in within 5 days? You don't have to come in at all.
Let's go back.
All of this.
Let's go back, because there's some miscommunication here. Your requirement to make it a public notice is in 5 days. I called here today to find out exactly when those applications go onto the site. They told me there's no set date. They just have to be before the 5 days. And which most of the time it's only within a few days behind that, which means that if you want to know and check, you have to come in and check with the office to see what applications have come in. In order to do that if I have to come in to check with the office to see what applications that gives me 12 days. That's the only way you get 12 days, by the way. It's the only way you get 30 days is to come in and look for those applications.
Not true, but go ahead. Okay. Don, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the other things that the town is trying to accomplish here is just to become consistent and in line with state law. In other words, this 10-day rule, or it's this 30-day rule, is only specific to this town. And this town, one of the things the town is considering is becoming consistent with state law, which doesn't have that rule.
Right. So in theory, we could get rid of that all, and now you have a 5-day notice requirement. That's it.
Yeah, 5 days notice requirement.
That's right. I'm saying that's all that state law requires. So the 12 actually gets you an additional week above what's required by state law.
Well, I'm just saying that the fact that this is here, and I'm talking to the rest of the board that hopefully will agree with me, that this is for the public. It gives us the ability, and somebody mentioned last time that there are different, it might have been you, that there are different intensities of varying applications, that sometimes, and then those, I understand you want to just get those through, but this is for the public and you can't determine which ones are going to be controversial and which ones are not. And for those that are, they need the time to be able to prepare their arguments. You want us to come in educated, you want us to come in prepared, you want us to be on top of what's going on, we need time to prepare. And I'm asking you, don't take away our time to prepare. It's for the public. The public is the one that's important here, not the applicant and not you guys. It's the public that is important here. And the fact that even Planned Parenthood went in just before a holiday did not go unnoticed. The fact that this is just before, after a holiday. Yes, it was just before a holiday. Look at it.
What holiday?
You know, I can't even think of it right now, but it was. What was it?
Right. So there's only 1 month in the entire year that doesn't have a holiday in it. So every single board meeting is going to be just before or after.
That, you know, people are coming and going. That's the whole point of the whole thing, is that people are coming and going. But the fact of the matter is it is for the public. So I'm asking the rest of you to consider the public when you're making your decision. Thank you.
Coming up.
Good evening. I'm Dorothy Hayes. And it is obvious that you guys do care about input and public input. I think your board, in terms of its patience and its listening to the citizens, is really exemplary. And that's why I do agree with Lois that there shouldn't be a change in this law. I only found out about this afternoon, and that's only because I have people like Lois that let us know what's going on. Everybody has busy lives. I know you guys do too. And that's where I think it is really important to give the citizens as much time as possible. Because I really can only imagine how many others in town don't know what is even being proposed, how it will affect their ability as taxpayers and residents to submit public comment on issues which concern all of us. The special use permits to locate facilities in our town that normally wouldn't be allowed in the zone. And there are so many.
So I just want to correct you on that. There's this belief that special use permits somehow go around the zoning code. That is not the case at all.
No, I get that, but it is, a change which people should be allowed to understand what's going on and give them time to address it.
It's not a change. Just to be clear, every restaurant that's gone into every commercial zone, every industrial zone, they all require special use permits. Do people think that somehow restaurants aren't normal? But they are all required. Apartment buildings, every apartment building here requires a special use permit. Hotels, I believe, all require a special use permit. So the idea that special use permits somehow go around the zoning code or is a change to the zoning code is not accurate. All it's saying is there's some things that it basically says, you know what? The town board doesn't need to provide any input on this at all. The public doesn't need any input on that at all. Those are the ones that do not require a special use permit. There's other uses that they look at and say, okay, there's a bit more impact here. So we want to hear feedback from the public. And that's part of what the special use permit public hearing is about.
Right, which again, justifies the 30 days instead of the 12, because that really is 12 days really isn't enough. And I do think the board really does value public input. And that's why this, there doesn't seem to be a reason for me to rush into this vote and to change it. Because it's very difficult for people who have jobs and kids and lives that can't be really expected to track down the agendas, and missing out on the opportunity to really understand and talk about these issues. And I understand you want to have input as early as possible, but that has to be balanced against the need for meaningful and informed input. Instead, I think you really should end up with, like you do tonight, with a few of us scrambling to find out what's happening, canceling dinner and trying to get out here to have our voice be heard. I think the proposed law does a disservice to the town residents, and I think wholly only one public hearing on this local law does a greater disservice to town residents. For these reasons, I ask the board extend the public hearing to the next regular town board meeting so that word can get out in town as to what's being proposed, so that informed people can let you know how they feel about it. And I do, especially being involved in some of these more controversial issues. I think that emphasizes it, but also for things that maybe not be so controversial that people, like for this instance, people it may not be on their, in their purview to see what's going on. So to have this opportunity for maybe some of the not bigger issues to give people this extra time, I think is important. And again, I appreciate your patience and your understanding. Good night.
So again, I have a problem not allowing us to have the earlier public hearings. That to me is problematic because they prove very useful.
So Supervisor, if I may, I think those of us who've been on the board and have seen the flow and the timeframes have some insight as to how the timing actually works, because the 12 days is intended to give people more time to respond, not less time to respond. Right. And I think perhaps the Southridge Landing project is a good example of that, where Southridge Landing came in early and often and allowed for a lot of public comment because of that.
So here's one of the things that we could potentially do if the town board feels, and I'm going to ask you to come back and answer if this, let me finish before you come up, addresses the issue. What if we basically said we allow the first public hearing to be as early as 12 days, but the public hearing cannot close? Instead, we change it that there has to be 30 days before the end of the public hearing. The public hearing cannot be closed for until 30 days have expired instead.
So the benefit to that would be that you have 12 days to hear it, and then you have the additional time to go back and see.
I don't even know that I'd bother to put in the 12 days at that point. I would just say that the public hearing cannot be closed until 30 days have expired since the initial application. Right. So that way we can have the early meeting, but to address Lois's concern, which again, I think is unfounded, but the thing we also have to keep in mind is that laws we pass aren't just for this board, but for future boards. So if we basically said that town board couldn't close the public hearing until 30 days have expired. So it's not that I can't hold a public hearing prior to that. I just can't close the public hearing until 30 days have expired. We would have to rewrite the.
I'm just looking at what it says now.
Supervisor, I think one of the issues that we had run into is the initial application as opposed to the completed application packet. And I think the 12 days was intended to make sure that the entire application packet was in.
I agree, but my point is, so let's say, and we could keep the 12 days in, it just gets lengthier.
Right.
But the point being, if there's a concern that, well, they didn't have, it was only 11 days, they got the second piece of information late. It's only 11 days to that first public hearing. The point is, no decision can be made then, and the public hearing can't be closed. So if something came in a little bit late, there's still another 2 weeks prior to the next public hearing, and plenty of time for those people who are at that first public hearing to, as was just stated, to go out and let other people know that here's some potential solution. So that, because like I said, to me, the biggest issue with this current rule is that we can't have that first public hearing. That's what I have a problem with. I don't have a problem with waiting the 30 days before the public hearings close, because we've never done otherwise.
What about, you have these restaurants come in for a special permit that want to go into an existing building. We're going to make them wait 30 days. I'm just asking, is that the plan? There are certain special use permits that bring a lot more
That's a good point.
Concerns, and there are certain others that no one seems to really have a concern with at all. People don't show up for it. there's no controversy. So
the restaurant ones is a good point. You know, the one of the, although I will say we'll be seeing fewer and fewer special use permits now that they don't expire with the current use, that you basically pick the categories.
The other issue is that we'll pass a lot of these special use permits and they'll say they need it right away. And then we drive by the facility and it's still not open.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that's a couple particular developers.
So, but I mean, it's even
know.
some of these restaurants
A
that
lot
you
of the
drive
restaurants.
by and you're
Mhm.
like, okay, it's supposed to be open in 30 days. They need it right away because they need to do blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, okay, you drive
Oh.
by it and it's still not even started
Right.
or even close to being started.
Some of the ones for being finished, sometimes that's the Department of Health, but if they haven't even started it, I agree. So going back to that restaurant though, Don, today they still have to get their application in 33 days before the public hearing.
The initial
Or
application.
before they're on the agenda. Well, it's more than theoretical, but
you mean by submission deadline
by
policy?
submission deadline. So there are, so
Well,
my
then-
point is that 30-day clock doesn't slow them down in that regards.
Yeah.
This would impose the hard 30-day limit that in theory, the submission could be waived, although town clerks are not keen on
Yeah.
that.
I mean, part of the,
for good reason.
I think part of the reason that this isn't in state law is because if someone comes and files an application in town for anything, including special permit or a site plan or subdivision, which I may add aren't subject to these provisions, the 30-day advance. Nobody in the public knows about it because the town has to process it, get it on the agenda, advertise it. So, you know, someone was saying, well, I don't know when applications are filed. Well, that's true. You won't know until, I mean, I guess you could come in every day and ask, has an application been filed? But the way land use applications work is someone files an application, it gets put on an agenda, it gets advertised, the agenda gets put out into the wild, people find out what's going on, and then it comes to the board where people can come and comment on it. So, you know, this idea that we have to wait 30 days after it gets filed, there's not a great direct connection there to public access, in my opinion, which is probably why it's not in state law. And the other, you know, concern I have with these kinds of provisions is you have it for this one narrow thing, special use permits. And we have all these other kinds of things we do in town, including, for example, a couple of local laws we have on the agenda tonight. They're not subject to these provisions. So, you know, the more we mix it up and change things around and put special rules in place for a narrow set of applications, I think, you know, does it potentially lead to missteps down the road? I don't know. I'm just begging the question.
So in terms of aligning with state law, that would not require necessarily any time frame whatsoever, except for the 30 days for coordinated seeker.
No, so for the other stuff, there is the town clerks religiously follow the rules as far as the notice has to be in the, you know, public notice has to be out, the application has to be available.
Yeah.
Right. State law has to do with the public hearing
Right.
notice requirements.
And that's all public hearings, not just special use permits.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't, as far as I know, state law doesn't have a requirement to get in an application X days ahead of time before a hearing.
It has to be.
It just has to do with the
It has to be
advertising.
in-house when it's advertised. It has to be available at the town clerk's office when it's being advertised.
And do we know what the general practice is for any other local towns within Monroe County or?
I haven't seen a rule like this in any other local towns. It doesn't mean there isn't one. I haven't experienced it. A rule that measures from the date of application filing, that is.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think one of the other problems inherent in a rule like that is the idea of when an application has been filed and you know, 97% of it has been filed. Someone forgot a paper. Now, do we blow the things like that where,
right,
you know, you have those kinds of questions come up as well. You know, I agree with public notice and giving people time to review things. Part of that, I think, comes from the people who are elected to your position And when you get an application for, you know, a McDonald's to change into a Burger King, you don't need 30 days, right? When you get an application for a big housing development like this, then you have multiple public hearings. That's you make those decisions with your discretion as elected officials. That's why you were elected. But, you know, there are also rules in place, including state law rules in the code that we've developed that help to buttress and protect against issues and sort of back up that discretion. So, you know, these kinds of decisions are tough. I think there are pros and cons for this, like anything.
And even going back to the restaurant example, right? Look at Chick-fil-A versus Island Wraps, right? Because the amount of traffic Chick-fil-A was going to generate and had generated in Greece caused huge issues. So we had multiple hearings with regards to that one. We brought in state agencies. We put all kinds of restrictions on that, far more than, I mean, no other restaurant application has come anywhere close to that, because no other restaurant application has that kind of impact. So, you know, that's one of the problems. Even within categories, there are categories, right?
Right.
Look at subdivision. There was someone who had a 10-acre lot and they wanted to create 2 5-acre lots in rural residential. That's not controversial, right? If they want to put in, you know, 150 lots, that would be, right? So
in my 9 years on the board, the public hearings for me are public information hearings. It's an opportunity for the public to come in and share what their concerns are with us and to ask questions that they could ask our architects, engineers, or whatever. I got the feeling for a while that maybe you were thinking we were trying to rush something through or not trying to sneak something by. My experience on the board is that they've been very good. The staff here knows what's controversial. We've had how many hours of public hearings on Planned Parenthood? 12, 13 hours. And Chick-fil-A, it's never been a situation where we wanted to rush something through or to get something by because people, you know, people go on vacation, people get sick. I love to have more than one public information hearing, especially if there's concerns with the community. And it's been my experience that this board and this supervisor and the other ones, when they feel that something is uncomfortable or not quite right with the people, Steve did it tonight. Before he closed the public hearing, he asked everyone here, did you want to extend it or keep it open? And the answer tonight was no. But many times when things come up, the information we get from the public and from each other allows us to make conditions on special use permits that fit what the public told us. And that's been my experience in 9 years. I've never seen anything pushed through, snuck through, or try to get by shortening timeframes and not getting public information.
Lois, you'll be next.
I can appreciate that, Rick. My concern is that, as it was brought up already, that you're making laws that are not just for you people. It goes down the line. Okay, so maybe you guys are all on board with this, but maybe we don't, the next group of people that come in are not as particular as you are about it. So that's one point. The other point about going out, having the 12 days and not closing it, are you saying that we would have another hearing in the 30 days so that we would have 2 hearings?
Correct. That's what I was saying.
Now, will all the information, I still am very particular about having all the information, even for that first hearing, because if we don't have all the information, how are we going to know what is being actually proposed? So I came in today because it was not easy to find your document online of the proposal for today. So I came in today.
Which proposal?
What the actual proposal for this particular part of this thing.
Are you talking about the local law that this?
Yeah, your proposal for this law right here was not easy to find.
By the way, that doesn't have a 30-day requirement, just to be clear, because it's not a special use permit.
Okay. My point is that I needed to have that in order to be prepared. That was my point of saying that. Okay. Right. I needed to come down and get that information, because if you want me to come here being prepared with why I don't agree or do agree with what you are proposing, then I need to have the information to do that.
Do you sign up for the e-notifies for the?
So I get it on a heads up on Friday. And then Monday's the full agenda. I get those.
Okay.
But that's not always sufficient. So a trip down, it's not so bad. But if you're closing up my time of when I have to come down here to get it, then you're making a really heavy burden on me and other people like me to have to come in and schedule my whole scheduling around this 12-day period in order to be prepared for a hearing. And I think it's very unfair to me, very unfair.
Right. So again, just so we're clear, in a local law, it's typically 14 days, because at one meeting, in fact, we've got it on the agenda tonight to call for a public hearing for a local law at the next meeting. There's no 30-day requirement. That's Don's point. The only 30-day requirement, the only public hearing that has that is a special use permit.
Well,
nowhere in the state law does it require that. None of it.
Yeah, the state law thing, and I'm not prepared to talk about state law right now. But one thing about state law is they don't work with local people. They're not working with the actual building of buildings and who's going in where. And so their law is not going to be necessarily sufficient for a town. That's all I can say at this point. But that is a consideration. Going back to the idea of the 30-day, I would still, as long as we're having the hearing after that, or at least at that 30-day, but all the documentation has to be, and even if I think about that, if I'm required to, or if we have the first hearing in the 12 days, I'm still in that position to be prepared for that first 12 days, right? But you're saying that it's not a big deal because I'll have my next hearing that I can talk at.
I just want to make a point, because you often reference things that were said in the past, and I don't want to have there to be any miscommunication here.
Okay.
If this law is passed, there's no requirement to have more than one public hearing.
If it's passed as is, I think she's referring to what I said as a possible way to alter it would just be that we wouldn't get rid of what I would do is, instead of changing the 30-day requirement for elapsed time down to 12, what I would say instead is that the public hearing cannot be closed for 30 days after. So the point is, it would allow us to have an early one, but there would have to be, at a subsequent meeting that's at least 30 days away, you would have to have that public hearing, and you close the public hearing at the end of a public hearing. I don't open the meeting and say no one can speak, I'm closing the public hearing. If the public hearing is still open and I start a meeting,
but are you actually having a meeting like this where it's open to the public for that public hearing?
Yeah, that's what a public hearing is. Okay. That's what I'm saying. If a public hearing is left open at the next meeting, it's automatically on the agenda because it is open still.
Okay.
To close it, in other words, it would be highly improper to come in, and I don't know if there's specifically a law against it. I don't know what the rules are. It's just one of those things. But in other words, I don't think you can start a public hearing by closing it. So like I said, anyway, the point being that because that public hearing is still open at the very next meeting, it's already on the agenda. And then at the end of it, you would be when it would be closed.
Then you would have to close it. So are you saying
no,
the end?
It can't be closed prior to 30 days. By law, we would have 106 or 124 days, right? Because it's the 62 day. Yeah. So now, even then, I don't even know if that's necessarily a limit, because there are ways, if both parties agree, you can extend it beyond that. But the point being,
and it's true with your seeker, by the way.
Well, I understand that. But so, like I said, my point being that the alternate to this, and again, we wouldn't be able to vote on it tonight because I'd want to word it and get it back out. But basically what the alternate would say is, instead of saying that you can't hold a public hearing within 30 days, we would say you can't close the public hearing within 30 days. So either I can wait till day 30 and hold one public hearing and close it, or I could have one on day 12 and one on day 30 and close it. I'd have
Or you
options.
could have it until the 30th and open it.
Pardon?
Or you could have it.
That's what I'm saying. I could either just
open it.
I could have one, right? And you're right. After that second meeting, I don't have to close it. I'm just saying the earliest I could close it is at 30 days. But again, this town board, typically, if there are still open issues, especially if like we identify things that need to be mitigated and they don't have an answer yet, and they're going to get back to us, we keep that public hearing open because we want the people who raised the issue that called for the mitigation to see what that proposed mitigation is. Now, sometimes they're ready on the spot. So for instance, on the one for Crossroads Chiropractic, one of the things we talked about, they can mitigate by just restriping the parking lot. We think there needs to be more parking spaces there, right? So they can offer it there. There's no reason to hold it open, because if they say, yeah, we can just restripe it, then we're done, right? But sometimes, like as the case with this Southridge one, we basically told them, here's the issue with your fire access. You need to figure out how to fix this. So they tried to get the access out through CVS. CVS didn't want to do that. So then they came up with the solution of on the west. So the point being, like I said, you do have different, in those cases, that's why we kept that open, because we wanted the neighbors to be able to hear the solution that mitigated the issues that were brought forward. Is there a way to codify that? No, you'll never be able to codify that. You can't, you just can't possibly write all the rules that govern that. And so basically you need to have watchdogs. You need to figure out, choose people you vote into office who make sure that they hear the public. And again, when I didn't feel that was happening, that's why I ran for office. I wasn't happy with what was coming out of town hall, and I ran for office. If you feel the same way, if you're unhappy with what my administration is doing, by all means.
I'm here because I want to get heard.
Yep.
And
appreciate
so
that.
I do appreciate you listening and considering my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hirsch, you were up next.
To be totally fair, I'm Mr. Hirsch again. I've heard a lot about this whole thing about town ordinances and town laws, right? And then the state law, which Mr. Young has codified, it says it's 5 days, which actually is less time. I want to just let the audience know, I'm pretty sure the board's aware of this, that the state law does in fact trump everything else. The town board, to the audience, cannot make any type of laws, rules that violate a state law. That is absolutely, without a doubt, a set thing. Town board does not have the authority to go over the state. The town, however, can, in fact, the town board, being a legislative body, can in fact pass rules and laws that are specific to the town, provided they don't violate a state law. And I don't think that the audience understands this, because Lois, or whatever her last name is, mentions that the state law is not considering what the town has, their unique circumstances. But what she's got to realize is that the state law is the state law, and no body below that can legislate anything that is state law. I mean, that just simply cannot be.
Right.
And I think the town board's aware of that fact, but I want to make sure that some of the people understand this,
right?
Because, this is something that cannot be done. Secondly, I want to point out that, the town board is elected officials. They have a duty and responsibility, to uphold the concerns of the public. I want to point out that under the public officers law, again, I've mentioned this in my issue many times, paragraph E of the public officers law basically clearly states that any type of documents, whatever they are, whether it's a special permit, whether it's some other type of document leading to an issue, has to be provided 24 hours before the town board meeting. Now, this is a state law that applies to all towns, municipalities. I don't know if she's aware of that, but it has to be made available so that people do have time okay, to review the information and prepare. Now, certainly 24 hours ahead of time to receive documents, as you are well aware, in my situation, I've stated that I need time to review it because 24 hours is hardly enough time prior to a board meeting to go over things. But at least it's available so that if it's something that might be simple enough, that is not complex, you know, that it can be reviewed within a one-day period to be prepared. But there is a law that says that any documents must be made available 24 hours prior to any meeting, hearing, whatever it might be. And if it's a special permit, right? Well, then, yeah, that information is advertised and it should be made available 24 hours. I don't know if she's aware of that, but there is a state law that says that. I'm just pointing that out to be totally fair, because I don't think that people really have bothered to look at the overriding laws that are there that are in place. And I just wanted to make that point to be totally fair to both sides.
Sure. Thank you. I think Lois is fairly knowledgeable on this type of stuff. One of the things to keep in mind, that state law discusses a minimum. So a town is allowed to create a longer time. They just can't put something shorter than the 5 days. So what she's asking, the 30 days, does not violate the state law. It's just saying that it's above and beyond what the state law requires. And again, to our town attorney's point, it creates a special case for the special use permit that sometimes can be problematic, where I have different rules for different types of public hearings, and that then creates potential missteps. And the problem that you have then is if you make a ruling and there's somebody who is disgruntled about it, they can file was it 78?
Article 78.
Article 78 that and challenge it based off of a technicality. And so you're trying to avoid the technical issues while at the same time trying to get enough feedback for us to make a proper decision. So coming up.
I first want to say, I hope I didn't imply in any way that I thought this board was trying to push anything through because I really do find you extraordinary in your openness and your willingness to hear all these different arguments. Truly a model in patience. But I do my antenna go up because we're not talking about today, but years from now, when you're giving the board more leeway to shut down discussion and to make it more difficult for citizens to investigate what's going on and to hear and have their points get across. That's really where my concern comes from. And I do trust that you take all these considerations under great thought and process. So I do appreciate that. And again, as an upstater, it does rankle me a little bit to consider everything under state law, because downstate is a truly different animal than is up here. So I do think that is something that obviously your board has taken into consideration with these rules, but that I appreciate that. So good night. Thank you again.
Thank you. Any other comments? Coming up.
Mr. Hirsch, again, in response to that, just for the audience, this is not for the board, for the audience again, there is an open meetings transparency law that the governor passed in 2021, which calls for open transparency upon local town boards, villages, and so forth. And therefore shutting like something down, like she mentioned, or whatever, like, I'm pretty sure the board's aware that they can't do that. I mean, the state has laws basically under the open meetings law. It's been discussed here several times, the public offices law, right? Where you cannot do that. It's a transparency law that was passed. The governor felt it necessary to do that. That came directly from Kathy Hochul, was signed into law 2021. So any concern about rankling, that sort of thing, I mean, the town board cannot, again, override that, or just for the audience's sake, let them know that they can't do that. They don't have the authority to do that. And everybody should be informed and aware that their rights are being protected because the state laws do, in fact, are there and they are in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to delay the decision on whether we close the special use permit or not when we get to the discussion of that resolution and whether we decide to move forward or not. If we decide that we may amend the resolution, then we'll keep the special use permit open. Obviously, if we're going to decide that we're going to vote on it as is, then I'm going to close the special use permit.
Is that the proposed local law?
That's the proposed local law. I mean, now what we can do if we want, we can just move to that right now. It's technically the last item on the agenda. But again, we have the ability to go in any particular order. So if you guys want to just jump to that now, the resolution 20-288, since we've had all this discussion.
Sure.
Okay. So, yeah, Millie, I'd like you to just read put the resolution on the table so that we have something we can be discussing. And again, like I said, what we will do is if we can decide to amend it, we can decide to table it, and that will determine what we do with the special use, or excuse me, with the public hearing.
All right, let me just.
I know it's going to take a second to get that up. No, it's. Yeah, it's that one probably is this.
If you go to the end of the page, it's the last
280.
Yeah, I opened the one that says only.
Went to the end and it's.
Oh, yeah, I got the one.
It is not at the end.
Did you put all the paperwork in it?
That's why you open the one that says only.
Yeah.
Here, I've got it.
Yeah, just give Millie mine. I've got
Okay.
it. So let's just make I don't know why it's not.
It is. It's not always. I was just double checking. Yeah.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 20-288, 2022 to adopt local law number 16 of 2022 to amend the Henrietta Town Code regarding the filing of special use permit applications.
Now, do you want me to second it? Even
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
second.
And now, yeah, just to be clear, so everybody knows,
We're approving.
right? Just because you put forward, even proposing an amendment or seconding it does not mean you necessarily approve it. It just means you approve bringing it up for discussion. So sometimes someone who puts forth the resolution or seconds a resolution will actually vote against it, or will vote to amend or whatever. So there's some people who think that putting it forth, it just says, I want to bring this up, put this on the table. So we, the local law basically, again, the way and if you look in your packet, you'll see there's a 20-288 local law zoning code update. What that local law, so I don't think anybody has an issue with renaming section 295-50 to special use permit required for uses within 500 feet of educational religious uses, right? Everyone agrees. Let's change the name so that it's easily spotted. The second portion is in 295-53 procedure for obtaining special use permits. Subsection A, it says shall have the 30-day requirement for the elapsed time between the application submittal and the public hearing reduced to a 12-day requirement such that the number 30 in said section is changed to 12. That's what it currently states. Okay, so we can vote up or down as it currently has. We can decide to table it, or we can put forth a so in the amendment, we could for now just strike the second portion of the local law and only include, in other words, only approve section 295-50 and then leave the decision for the other one till a later date. We could potentially amend the 295-53. I would have to pull up the whole wording. I can do that in a second. That again, instead of it saying that 30 days has to elapse before the public hearing can be held, it would be that 30 days has to elapse before the public hearing can be closed.
I like that personally. I like that in 12, I like having it twice, because sometimes I feel like when we have it once, we really need time to digest it and to figure out what's going on and if there are additional questions and those kind of things. I like the idea of not having closed in under 30 days. I like the idea of having more. To me, it feels like almost like I'm getting like a snippet in 12 days or, hopefully all of it. But then it gives me time to do some more research, within those 30 days. So I like the ability to say that it can't close in under 30 days because I like having that.
Other comments from board?
Well, I think, again, one of the questions I have is the issue of a complete submission of documents. That the 12 days was intended to make sure that the public has the ability to review all of the application material and not just the start of the application. So that was, if we say shall have 30 days, that means that the applicant could take the entire 30 days.
No,
it just means
I'm agreeing with what you're saying because I feel the same way. They need to have a complete paper,
right.
The complete paperwork by that point. So I agree with you. So I'm saying, not saying no.
We're not saying it. I know what you meant. What the thing is though, Millie, again, this isn't saying it has to close within 30 days. It's saying it cannot close prior to 30 days. So if they don't have the complete application in, if there's any issues, we can basically say, we're going to keep this public hearing open until you get the.
So I'm still in favor of having some sort of a hard deadline.
So the hard deadline by state rules is 5 days. Just to be clear. So the 12 adds an extra week essentially, but.
Yeah, for the,
Completed paperwork.
Completed paperwork that's 5 days prior to the final date of the hearing. So that would mean that applicants would be able to complete their application packets at day 25.
So again, no, that doesn't, because.
Well, hold on a minute. Let me just jump in. The town really shouldn't be in the practice of putting applications on the agenda when we don't have a complete application. So as a general matter, I think the process for the town is get a complete application, advertise it, or put it on the agenda, or get it before the board. I think. I mean,
right, but to give you an example of some of the stuff that happens, right? You get an application, it's essentially complete, but hey, we noticed you missed one piece of document, right? We typically give them a short amount of time to get it in, or else we're not going to make a decision. We tell them that routinely. So typically the deadline is the Friday. Sometimes we'll give them till the Monday or Tuesday. Now, in theory, again, that's 33 days. If I'm going to Monday, I'm now down to 30 days, right? But we will give them a little extra time. If it's something major, we'll say no.
So
you're not going to make this meeting. So that happens all the time, that they don't get the information in time and complete, and we kick them back to a subsequent meeting. So that again, that happens all the time. You just don't see it because, even like some of the stuff, the only reason people are aware that there was a rezone request that came in, right? And the rezone request was pulled based after hearing us talk about our reticence to consider it at the workshop. They decided to pull it, right? To save their fees essentially. So like I said, that never even gets out. That never even was advertised to the public because we were going to, at this meeting, call for the public hearing. It never even got called. So like I said, those kinds of things happen all the time. Even the board members don't typically see them. The rezone requests do because I'd sent information out, and obviously we had the discussion at the workshop. But for some of these, when an incomplete application comes in, if they don't get us the stuff, and if it's a major incompletion, we reject it. One of the things that happens, especially with people for whom English is a second language, there are things like on some of these restaurant applications, there's little things missing. And it doesn't, if it's anything that substantially changes the understanding of the application, then we're going to push them out. If we get to the hearing and find that there is something substantial missing, what do we always do? We push them out, right? We don't make a decision then. So you know, I understand where you're coming from, but like I said, just because the minimum is 5 days, hard 5 days, doesn't mean we allow them to do it. And again, that's up to us. If somebody doesn't get us the material we want, this town board can say, we're going to hear public input from the public because people came here to show up and give that feedback, but we are not going to make a decision on this because you did not have this to us in time, and we're going to hold a subsequent public hearing at the next meeting.
Well, I
We've
think
done
what
that
I'm
on
hearing
multiple occasions.
from the public comments tonight is that they want to have adequate time to be able to review the entire application packet. So it was my understanding with the 12-day hearing is that we would have an opportunity at that point to review all of the information 5 days prior to that 12 days. And then we would have adequate time to.
Well, I don't know what you mean 5 days
information.
prior to that 12 days.
When exactly are we talking about the deadline for, what's the time frame
Okay,
here
so-
that we're looking at in terms of the entire application packet being in? and
Typically, that
issued?
is 33 days in advance.
Okay.
If there is something substantial missing, if there's something minor missing, again, typically we review the packet submission and we'll say to them, hey, you're missing this, get it to us by this date. If it is a substantial item missing, we'll basically say your packet was incomplete. We're going to push you out to the next meeting, which basically means now it's minimum of 47 days away because it was 33 from submission. You're adding at least 2 weeks to the schedule if I'm pushing them out of meeting.
So it was my understanding that that was where we ran into some issues before, is that there was not an entire application packet submitted 30 days prior to the start of the hearing.
In one of the review, there was some stuff missing. And so again, we had the hearing, but we're not going to make a decision at that hearing because they didn't have the full packet in for a long enough time. So again, it still allowed us to have the hearing, and because there were a ton of people showing up for that meeting. I would hate to send them all home saying, sorry, we can't hear you tonight because they had a page missing from their application. Come back in 2 weeks. That's not good to do the public. I'd rather hear the public input, but the point is they now have another. You put your arm down for now. When the way this works, we first have the discussion amongst the board, then we'll invite the public. So the point being, we have that hearing, the people have the ability to provide input, but if they haven't had time to prepare because the packet wasn't fully submitted, they're going to have time at the next meeting because we're not going to close that if they didn't have the stuff that packet fully available. That again, this is a minimum amount of time before I close, not a maximum. So someone can't just turn it in 5 days before the meeting. First off, again, the submission deadline is 33 days in advance of the meeting. And part of that reasoning is because if it turns out to be a coordinated review, we need that amount of time to start the seeker process. Even if it is not a coordinated review, we still have a bunch of time, right? Town board members need time to go visit the site, to look at the stuff, to get an understanding of it. The public wants time to look at it and get an understanding of it. So, again, that doesn't mean we can't gather input prior to having that full time elapse, right? I get input on, like there was the one we were still waiting. If you remember, the submission was done, but the county hadn't gotten us the full, or no, I'm sorry, it was the state. And this was Lehigh Ridge. The state hadn't gotten us the full traffic information. So we couldn't make a decision at that meeting because we didn't have all the material we needed to make a secret determination. However, we still held the public hearing because a ton of people showed up to provide us input, to have said, sorry, we don't have everything. We can't, that would have been bad. But what did we do? We said, okay, we're still waiting on the traffic study from the state, or more accurately, the state's response to the applicant's traffic study. We were still waiting on that. So we made it clear, we're not going to make a decision tonight, but we're going to hear all your feedback and we're going to work that into our secret determination. So,
one thing I just want to point out again, plant into your minds is that I think part of the reason that this isn't in state law is because from the perspective of the public, they don't know on any given day when an application is filed. So to me, it's strange to measure decision date from date application is filed, because I don't know when an application is filed. I only know about an application when it's advertised, when it's put in the paper, when it's on an agenda. And so I think this whole idea of measuring for the public's benefit from the filing of an application, it doesn't really seem to match up well with the intent. The state law handles that topic by saying you need to publicly advertise and sometimes post X days before the hearing date. And that makes sense, because when it gets put in the newspaper and on your website, now people have access to it. They know there's an application to consider. If the town gets an application and it sits on it for 2 weeks because there's 3 weeks before the next board meeting, or you have a full agenda, or they're busy and they didn't get it advertised, and then they advertise it 5 days ahead of time, the 30-day thing doesn't really help anybody. The 30-day, the submission deadlines prior to a meeting help the clerk's office, because that gives them time to make sure the application is complete, to put together the notice for the newspaper, to get it to the newspaper, which, by the way, they can't send it to the newspaper on Wednesday the 14th and get it in the newspaper on Wednesday the 14th. They have to send it to the newspaper some amount ahead of time so they can get it. So
12th, I believe. My
point being is that I just find it a little bit strange to measure from the application date for the benefit of the public. I know that it does build in some buffer, obviously, because if you have to wait 30 days from the application date, then you have to wait 30 days from the application date. But the real meaningful thing is, when did the public find out about it? That's where you should, in my opinion, that's where you should measure from.
The other thing I will point out with the public hearing, especially with respect to a special use permit, any properties within, 500 feet, 1,000 feet of the subject property also receive a notification by mail, they are not
for special permits, right?
Special use permits. It's also for some other ones like subdivision. I think I don't remember, final site plan is on that list as well, but there's a number of specific property related special use permits that, in addition to the public notice in the newspaper, the stuff is also actually, the notice is actually mailed out to anybody who is within a particular radius. Now, what we do is we typically, so again, I'm going to use Southridge as an example. When you drew that circle, there were like 3 houses on Thompson Road that weren't included. Yeah. We included all of Thompson Road. It's not fair, in our opinion, to those 3 people to not receive the notice, because they come out the road, it's still going to affect them. So, but like I said, that this goes back to, again, we can do more than required by state law, but you can't do less.
Right. And the other thing about when you measure from the advertisement date is, there's no argument about the advertisement date. Here's the newspaper, here's the date, you're done. When you measure from application filing or completion or whatever, just like we've seen before, someone comes in with a paper that was filed 2 days after the package now is at the application date, or, hey, they updated it, or there's some additional information or things said at a meeting. And then you beg the question, and then you have that ambiguity floating around. And so I just don't want to do something that creates more questions than it answers.
So rather than necessarily changing it from 30 to 12 or anything along those lines, having something along the lines of a minimum of a 12-day notification, would that satisfy?
I would need to check with the town clerks tomorrow to find out whether that's even doable. So if we're going to think about going something along those routes, then my suggestion is we either modify it to only include the change of the 50, or perhaps we just table the whole thing, because, to be honest, the other one's just a rename of a title, so it doesn't. It's not changing.
Yeah, I don't think you should bother chopping this up. It's
I would agree.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we should table.
So
yeah.
Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to table? Or Millie, you can modify your motion. You just say, I modify my motion to table the resolution.
Okay, I make a motion to modify resolution 20-288, 2022.
Modify or to table?
Table. The table.
Second.
Okay. Any objections? I will ask for, I'll let you get some additional input if you want prior to, but go ahead. If you want to give some now, or you can be here when it comes back, it'll be on the agenda for the next meeting. You can way back then. Correct. Because we've tabled it, I am not going to close the public hearing. Remember, I waited that decision until after we decided what we were going to do. Because it's being tabled, I'm going to keep the hearing open. I'm not 100% certain, but it's on the agenda. I don't know that the new, if we're going to put together an updated law, we'll have to have that law ready at least 1 week in advance for the meeting. If it's not ready, then obviously at the next public hearing, we'll hear input, but we wouldn't make a decision because the updated law is not ready. So if you want to speak, coming up, Lois.
I'm a little bit confused right now of the 33 days. I don't know where the 33 days comes from because the
it's if you look at the application deadline. So if you look at the schedule.
But that's kind of imposed by you guys.
So it's 30 days.
No, this is a part of the code. The 33 days, I don't think is a part of any code.
It gets adopted at the organizational meeting.
Well,
it gets adopted every year.
To change that to the full 30 days so that you're not having 3 days? That would give 3 additional days for the applicant to submit.
Again, I want to be able to have a public hearing before that 33rd day. I want to be able to have a public hearing at the meeting before.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because this is only indicating that you need 30 days. So the extra 3 days, the 295-53 only requires 30 days.
Right.
Okay.
For a public hearing.
For the public hearing.
Correct.
Correct. So is now what we're talking about, the 33 days you're saying before
the 33 days for someone to get on the agenda for a meeting, they have to have their application in 33 days in advance.
Okay. So, but that is a organization. That is an organizational law rather than.
Correct. We adopt that every year. Then basically what happens, but again, that's to be on the hearing, what we want to be able to do. The problem with the way 295-53 is written today, in addition to the ambiguities that Don brought up, there's also the problem is that we cannot have a public hearing prior to that decision date. I would like to have that because we've done that with other.
Prior to what decision date? Because you have 120.
The date that the final thing is on the agenda. So again, if someone submits an application and use the rezone, so it's not a special use permit. There was a rezone thing. We actually had a discussion this week about it, even though the hearing wasn't going to be till next week, right? So now in this case, it never made it past the town board. It didn't even bother to go to the public because we all felt it was contrary to the comprehensive land use plan. But again, with this type of stuff, we often, not for some of these permits, not all of them, certainly the vast majority we don't. But for some stuff, we want to be able to have feedback prior to that 33 days, because again, a lot of times we don't like to make the decision on ones like that the same night. If you write the resolution and the seeker findings and everything up front ahead of times, there's this belief that it's predetermined, right? And then even, one of the things that we've seen you've run into is if stuff comes up in the hearing and I haven't gone back and added those to my reasons for approval or reasons for denial, that can cause issues. Okay. And so for those reasons, we like to be able to have the one hearing ahead of time and then take that feedback and roll it into the next one. And then if we hear at the next meeting, if we don't hear anything substantially different, we're good to go. If we hear something substantially different, and again, we've done this, Lehigh Ridge is one of the most recent examples, actually, as was I guess the most recent was the one tonight, right? When we heard something substantially different, we said, well, we're not going to make a decision tonight because we need you to go and address this issue and come back. So it just gives us more ability to hear more input and to act on that input. Whereas if you just wait till the 30 days and you hear that input and you make that decision that night, that doesn't give you that flexibility. And yeah, you can impose the additional 14 days. And again, if we feel it's necessary, we do that. But if quite often we would prefer to get that up front so that the applicant has time to address it, to come back and come up with alternatives. We have time to, make a determination as to whether the mitigations that they are proposing, whether we really truly believe that they mitigate the issues. Because some, and again, I'm going to use an example from the chiropractic application. They said, well, we'll have the applicants park in the back, right? Mm-hmm. If you remember, we didn't make the decision that night because we had some questions about that. So a couple of us went over and visited, and you go around back, there is no place to park for employees to park in back. It's full of dumpsters. So that's clearly not a sufficient mitigation of the issue that we identified.
So what happened with that case?
Pardon?
What happened to that situation?
It hasn't been resolved yet.
So is it still open hearing then?
So basically what they have to do is come back to us with, we heard all the public input. We now need to hear. One of the things we looked at and talked to our director of engineering and planning, they can restripe the parking lot to get an additional 5 parking spaces. If they're willing to commit to that mitigation, we can approve it. If they're not, I can't speak for the other town board members, but I'm not going to approve it if they're not willing to put in those extra 5 spaces, because I think that parking will be a problem otherwise. So that's an example of these instances where we want that an additional time.
I just want to add one more thing, is that you can still, I know you keep wanting to make this shorter, but the fact with the seeker that you're talking about, that can be extended as well. You're not crunched into a seeker time. So technically you could have a second hearing even afterwards, because the decision on that is still out 20 days. I mean, that's another option that you guys have not discussed at all. And I would really suggest that you table this, because I would personally like to get more input after I've listened to what your attorney has said, and I have a chance to review that. So I would request that you table it.
Well, as you heard, there's already a motion on the table to request it to table it. But so I will just state, like I said, in terms of, I lost where I was going with that. Anyway, okay, thank you. Go on. Try to keep it short. We're already at 8 o'clock and we haven't gotten to any resolutions yet.
I'm sorry, I keep it very short.
No problem.
All I wanted to say is, again, with regards to what Mr. Young has been saying, I mean, the state law is 5 days. We understand that. But at the same point, this is a balancing act, okay, right? I mean, the town board has to be fair to the public, right, in terms of their concerns, and give whoever it is, right, enough time. That's the big issue that I've had, enough time to review information thoroughly before issuing any type of response whatsoever. With regards to that, that is key. That's important. And certainly the public needs to have that time, or whoever it is, to prepare. But by the same token, okay, with regards to Mr. Young's concerns, I think that's a bit, let's say, one-sided, because it is basically you have to give the people a chance to review the information and to be prepared. And the other thing is that, like what you said, sometimes you get an application that may come in, right, and it's not complete, or something may come up. Supposing something comes up, and this is my question, supposing something comes up within that 12-day period now, okay, something that you didn't expect or nobody could possibly allow for. So now you're going to have extra time anyway to allow for that new development or whatever it might be. And then on top of that, whoever it is that's going to prepare must have time to review that based on what the outcome is of that whole thing.
So to Mr. Young's point, we should have the legislative discretion to make a determination as to whether that circumstances exist. Just as right now, we're talking about tabling this because of the discussion that came up here. There's no requirement that we table it. There's no requirement that we keep the public hearing open.
I think it's
we're electing to do that because we've heard that there's discussion and issue, and so we're going to try to address it.
And I think it's a good idea to table it, especially if you're saying that you have to talk to the town clerk because they're involved, apparently.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Anything else? Okay. And we do. Hearing no further discussion, there is a motion on the table to table resolution 20-288 2022 to next week or next meeting, excuse me. So that would be September 28th. Hearing no further discussion, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye. I'm just okay.
First resolution.
Yes, well, technically, I guess it's our second resolution. Oh, well, actually, let me finish. So the public hearing for the proposed local law will remain open and will be continued on September 28th. Okay. All set.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 20-275/2022 to authorize bills payable for August 30th, 2022 through today, September 14th, 2022.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 20-276, 2022 to approve special use permit application SP 2022-035 for Crossroads Chiropractic.
Second. Is there a representative from Crossroads Chiropractic here or online?
Yes, I am here. I'm sorry, guys. I wish I could have been there. I just tested positive for COVID this morning, so I am doing this from my bedroom.
No problem. We appreciate you not showing up if you're test positive. So we basically reviewed this. We a number of us spent some time looking at the traffic. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the narrative for the special use permit, but we felt that there needs to be a few more parking spaces. There were a number of times when that lot was full. And like we saw where some people were blocking the access to the rear of the building. Some people were parking in improper places. In talking with our director of engineering and planning, as well as my deputy town supervisor, we all felt that you could rotate some of the spaces to gain 5 or 6 additional parking spaces. If you're willing to offer that to mitigate the parking issues, we would make it subject to approval by the director of engineering and planning. Since it's an existing building, there isn't a site plan review. So I just want someone to review it, and it shouldn't be us. So my thought is we would have it, you could look at how to restripe it to add 5 or 6 more spaces, and that plan would be subject to approval by the director of engineering and planning. Are you willing to offer that?
I guess the only hard part is I don't own the building. I'm just looking to lease the space. So I would have to ask the owner of the actual commercial property if you'd be willing to do that.
So I guess the thing we could look at is we could approve it. If you're willing to offer it, I understand that you may not have the authority to do that. The condition upon that, if somehow that falls through, then we would have to reconvene. But this would prevent you from having it if he says okay. And I don't know why he wouldn't. When you look at the space between the ones along Erie Station Road and the spaces that are up in front of your lot, there is a ton of space I understand as you get closer to the gas station pumps, you need room for the tanker truck to pull out, but that's typically the first handful of spaces. So again, I've got to believe that they'll be able to come up with a means to stripe it. And again, I think it's better for all of the tenants of that entire plaza. So I don't know why he wouldn't be willing to, but.
Well, the other thing is, if he wants to fill that space and we have a concern with parking and he says no to this,
then he's not filling.
He's going to have a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And
I don't know
that's part of the agreement that I have with him through our contract is that this special use permit has to be, granted, or else I will not be leasing this space. So I guess, again, if it's through you guys, if you're not going to allow the special use permit, regardless, if he does not add spaces, then I agree with you. I don't see why he wouldn't add it. Right. Is there a way then, if I can get, I'll just shoot him an email tonight to try to get this done as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So
my point being, you guys. Right. So again, if you offer that and I understand that you may not be able to come through on that offer, but we would make the approval contingent upon that the parking lot's restriped to add those spaces. Then the point is, as soon as if he says yes, he can come in and meet with Chris Martin, who's the director of engineering and planning. I mean, as soon as tomorrow, and he could get that approved. So it could be really quick.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Let's make it to that, because I mean, I'm hoping that this practice grows just as busy as our current one in Lima. So having more parking would benefit me in the long haul anyway. So I don't mind this being a thing anyway. So yes, if I'll definitely go with trying to get more parking spaces to make this approved.
Okay. Okay. So again, that's the way we wrote it. Cause to be perfectly blunt, I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I wasn't going to approve this without the additional parking space, because again, when you look at some of these other plazas where there's maybe other plazas next door where someone can park in that other plaza and walk over, that's not the situation here. It's the only plaza around. And so if there isn't space, people park illegally, and that causes problems. So that's why we feel that this is important. So, okay. So with you willing to offer that mitigation, now obviously we're going to still hear from public hearing, but I'm willing to move forward on this. So.
Okay. So at least 5 spots, you said?
Oh, I know that. I'm saying, yeah, we had the public hearing and close it, but
is there ways
any resolution we allow feedback from the public? I don't know if any well, right. So it's basically says, what it says is the town board thus approves the application such as special use permit for the chiropractic medical officer is approved subject to the following condition: that prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the parking lot will be restriped to include at least 5 or 6 more spaces. So 5 is the minimum, 6 is preferred, subject to the approval by the director of engineering and planning.
And so because you're stipulating parking lot, they can't say, well, go park in the back on the stone.
No, if he wants to pave the back, which is significantly more expensive, he could go that route. I don't think he wants to go that route.
He's not going to say, well, you've got 5 or 6 spots in the back next to the dumpster.
No, he doesn't. Yeah, I'm with you. I was back there. There are not 5 or 6 spaces. I'm not even sure there's 1 space really.
Yeah, because there's like 3 dumpsters back.
Right. And then there are also 4 or 5 emergency exits from those buildings too. So I just don't think there's any parking in the back the way it's currently configured. So is there anybody who wishes to comment from the public? Then hearing any further comments from the town board? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolster?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye. Congratulations. if he has any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, supervisor@henrietta.org. You can also email Chris Martin at cmartin, all one, at henrietta.org. Or you can look our phone numbers up online.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to having a chiropractic location in town. welcome. If you want anything to help with the grand opening, let me know. I, as town supervisor, I'm also a member of the Henrietta Chamber of Commerce. They have a whole kit to help with ribbon cutting, anything like that. So if you're interested, again, just email me at supervisor@henrietta.org.
Perfect. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Fellow board members, I have resolution 20-277, 2022 to call for a public hearing for a proposed local law to update the incentive zoning code.
Second.
So again, one of the things, we believe there was a 50-acre minimum with respect to the open space incentive. We think that came from from a sample legislation that we used to build this. I even went back and polled all of the board members who were on the board when were working on this special use permit, on the comprehensive land update. That was Scott Adair, Rob Barley, Mike Stafford, obviously Rick Page and myself are still on the board from that team, but none of us remembered a 50-acre minimum. So we assume, I was surprised to see it in there. I think it, like I said, came from the sample legislation. And then the second thing we had discussions about was that the public amenity of the preservation of historic properties. Yes, we wanted that as part of the historic properties incentive zone, but we actually wanted it for any of the other zones. And as an example of that, there have been a couple apartment complexes being built on farms, and the farmhouse is historic. And so we've made it as a requirement. We want to be able to, it's tough to make that a requirement, but you can make it an incentive. So if they want an additional, some number of units or some other benefit to them, we can basically say, well, if you preserve this historic house, then we will allow that additional benefit. And so, again, and two that come immediately to my Lehigh Park Apartments had to preserve a historic property. Rock River Apartments had to preserve a historic property. So we want that in more than just the historic district zone. So those are the two changes. Any questions on that? And hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 20-278, 2022 to accept dedication of approximately six acres of land to satisfy a condition relative to approval of the Riverton Parcel E project.
Seconded.
So if you'll recall, and I even went back and double checked the minutes, they had a choice in that approval to either place a conservation easement over the property or to donate it to the town. At the time, they chose the conservation easement route. I even asked them why are you paying property taxes on land that you can't do anything with? But they made that decision. They have since reconsidered, and they are going to donate the land to the town. The reason we're interested in it is there is a parcel immediately adjacent that is a 9-acre lot, and that belongs to the Rush Henrietta Central School District. At the time Riverton was built, they wanted to make sure they preserve space in case there was ever a desire to put an elementary school in that area. At the time, 9 acres was the minimum. Today, that minimum is 12 acres, although the preferred for Rush Henrietta School District is 15 acres. So by adding the 6 acres to that 9 acres, it will meet the 15 acres. What we will do is we'll essentially hold it as a conservation lot. And if the school district ever wants to develop that, we will then transfer it to the school district. We'll sell it to them for $1. One of the other reasons we're doing it this way, instead of having them donate it directly to the school, the land that has the Rush Henrietta Athletic Association ball fields is actually school property. The school rents it to us for $1 and we rent it to RHAA for $1. But the problem with that is, so for instance, when some of their dugouts blew over, our town crews couldn't help put them back up because you're making real property improvements to land not owned by the town. The school district wants to hold on to that land right now because they want to have site in the event that they ever need to have a second high school. So I've spoken with Assistant Superintendent Andy Whitmore. And what we're going to do, we've got a couple of these developments coming in. In fact, potentially they haven't come in yet, but there's one that was proposed over on the west side that would include land immediately west of Berger. I guess it's now junior high school, right? Used to be Berger Middle School. So there's land there that would be the perfect location that they would like to have for that high school. And it would be enough acreage for that high school. However, the acreage at RHAA is bigger. And the reason you need to sometimes do an equal area swap is because a lot of times school districts land essentially underwrites some of their debt. And so the banks don't want to see them give up acreage. So whereas this extra 6 acres isn't super critical to their mission right now, if that other location is donated to the town and we combine it with this 6 acres, we can meet the requirements to make the swap for RHAA. So that's why we're doing it to the town. I've already had long conversations with Assistant Superintendent Whitmore about this. It's a win-win for everybody involved. So that's what this one's all about. Any questions coming up?
Just one question, Mr. Hirsch, again. If you're going to hold the land because you're holding it for them, if they don't put another high school or an elementary school on that parcel or on that land that you're talking about, what is the town going to do with it?
It would stay wild land, which actually was one of the issues that was brought up during the public hearings, that there isn't a whole lot of wild land left in Riverton.
Right.
And so by doing this, essentially that whole 15 acres, the 9 acres from the school and the 6 acres from the town, will stay wild unless it is needed for an elementary school. So it would just stay wild.
Well, is there wildlife on there now? I mean, is there actual wildlife? I mean, I like deer.
Yes,
there
are deer crossing there.
Really?
There's rabbits.
Oh, okay.
There are fox.
I'm just curious. Where is this exactly? Riverton. I'm not sure.
It's near the pharmacy.
Yeah, in fact, the parcel E wraps around Miller's Pharmacy on Scottsville West Henrietta Road.
Scottsville West Henrietta. Okay, that's all the way over by RIT.
No,
south
of there, but
of
it's
the
Scottsville
freeway.
Road goes past there.
Scottsville West Henrietta Road. It's the one that comes over the bridge by the Riverton Golf Course.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, if I can request a very brief bio break.
I'm okay with that.
Thank you.
Okay, we will take a
5-minute break.
5-minute break.
Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, I loved your comment the other day with the phone. That was classic. You're going to be 75 something too. That was such a great comeback.
We were at the board meeting yesterday, and the library board meeting, and one of the girls called older people seasoned, and I go, "Oh, I like that. I'm not old. I'm seasoned."
Right. Some of us have more seasoning than others. But.
Yeah, I thought that was a great comment. I still love Craig's comment from the Sustainability Committee. Love your comment about raising children and grandchildren and all that kind of stuff.
Right. That raise your children, spoil your grandchildren. Right.
Right.
Your children, raise your grandchildren. Yeah.
I wrote it on a piece of paper. I have it hanging above my desk. I cannot talk. It's cold in here. I'm Like,
I swear this room either has to be too hot or too cold.
it's unbelievable.
You cannot. Well, I can't wait till they reissue sand grants because I really want to fix this.
Heating.
Well, this whole wing.
Yes, I put it on a piece of paper and I put it right up on my bladder above my desk because I love the saying so much.
Yeah, so it's not really germane. No, yeah, and I also look at, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for them since they could have done this anytime in the past 9 months.
But that's my thing with this seeker and special use. They come in here and they want us to make a decision in like 2 hours, and then they sit on it. You know, when you drive by, like you do the car wash.
The biggest criminals for that to me are Frank and Lou. They're both. I got this spot. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But the you know, and even the Delphi one was a perfect example.
Oh yeah.
Well, he didn't have everything buttoned up with the tenant, so they got the tenant's like, well, hold on a minute.
It's like we have to have the answer now. You have to. What do you mean you can't give us the answer now? And nothing happens for months.
Right.
Like,
yes.
What is the issue here?
Well, that's why I told him you got to want it on the agenda, then get it on.
Tell him he can't put anything on the agenda until he starts that brewery. I want. I mean, I want.
The problem with that brewery is those individuals. They lost their chef, and none of the banks will bankroll them the money without the chef because they're too.
They can't find another chef.
They have not been able to as of yet.
It's tough to find a good chef. Craig's supposed to find us a good Mexican restaurant for Henrietta, but he hasn't done it yet.
No, we've got a lot of culinary students. Well, not a lot.
I'm sorry.
My school, we have a culinary program, and some of them that are very talented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lost our talent.
We lost Craig too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's talking.
Craig, please don't be assigned to tasks.
We'll make sure he knows that.
See, what are we going to make Craig do next?
We do that at the Supervisors Association. If you don't show up at the meeting,
you get it.
You. And very good, much better attendance lately. We're only at 3 people who are to be at the next meeting. Not counting Reese never shows up. No. I sometimes think our meetings are better off because additions.
Oh yeah, just yelling.
Don, if you're out in the hallway gabbing, please come on in.
I saw him go into the office back there.
He was going to fill his water, but the problem, I'm afraid that he's gotten intercepted by.
Is there anybody in there that he can talk to?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
There's only 4 walls there, right? If he might even only talking to the 4 walls.
Don.
Building, engineering, all the directors.
Oh, they're over there? Oh.
They're online. They did. Hey, we're ready.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah. Someone laughed at me. Oh, we had company over and my kid hadn't come down for dinner. So I called them because that's how you have to do it.
Oh, yeah, how you get them.
That's how you do it.
He's got his headphones in, listening to music off his phone. If you don't call his phone,
you know,
he'll never hear you.
Technology is the only thing that has improved in the last, let's say, 50 years. That's about the only thing that's done.
I'm not sure it's all.
I'm not sure that it's
well.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's an improvement.
It is. It's an improvement, but it's also one that potentially leads to issues.
Advancement, but not necessarily improvement.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Okay, Becky, are you there? Are we unmuted?
You are unmuted and ready to go.
Okay. All right. Let's resume.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 20-279, 2022, to authorize the expenditure of up to $20,000 to defend against the lawsuit brought against the town board by Planned Parenthood.
Second.
So I'll actually be voting no on this. I did vote to approve the attorneys. I just think it's too much to spend. We all know we have a difference of opinion over this particular subject, so I don't need to say much more than that, but anyone else care to comment or not? Anything from the public coming up?
I am so disappointed to hear you say that.
Okay.
That's what I want to say, because I'm still waiting for that public apology, because you offended the entire town and this is your fault. So
I sincerely disagree with that statement, but you're entitled.
You
to your
don't
opinion.
get to go around bad mouthing the board members and supporting an organization in which was turned down by this town. And
I'm not supporting any organization. I really don't want to rehash this. It's in the minutes that we approved tonight. Okay.
You could have kept that comment out of here.
Whatever.
And you wouldn't have had an argument from me at all.
Whatever. Any further comment? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
No.
Councilmember Bolsner?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Nay.
Well said. Supervisor Schultz and fellow town board members, I have resolution number 20-280/2022 to approve the town's participation in the multimodal grant program for the East River Road Corridor multimodal path.
Seconded.
So, as folks may be aware, we've been working for some time to get a multimodal path built along the east side of East River Road, similar to the path that is along the west side of John Street. We did receive funding from the New York State DOT to do some of that. In multimodals, there is a match requirement, local match requirement. The good news is that our local match is coming from funds generated through the East River Road seeker mitigation fees. So rather than come out of the pockets of the taxpayers, it's coming out of the pockets of the developers who are essentially adding traffic to East River Road. So in 2018, I believe it was, we did East River Road corridor study. I think the study was actually done before that. I think it was completed in 2018 or maybe even 2019, where we looked at all the potential build out. The county, we've been working very closely with Monroe County DOT. They put together a plan on how to mitigate a lot of the problem intersections in that corridor. They came up with an estimated cost. We then assigned a particular portion that had to be handled by the seeker mitigation fees. And so we've been collecting those fees when so you see these new projects along East River Road, they've had to contribute towards that funds. So in addition, so like I said, we'll be able to get the $500,000 up to $500,000 from the New York State DOT, and we'll be able to do our matching contribution from the seeker mitigation fees so that there's no out-of-pocket expenses that get passed on to the taxpayers. So it's a win-win-win. The county is very excited about this because it helps improve the intersections, and they're going to be leading the construction effort. So it's a really good intermunicipal arrangement along with support from the New York State DOT. Any questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 20-281, 2022 to accept the dedication of roadways and sidewalks for Trail View South subdivision.
Second.
Um,
So this is something a little different than norm. And one of the things we're going to be looking at, we're kind of changing the way or the timing on some of the dedications of roads. So one of the challenges, there was a updating of the understanding of case law with regards to the town's ability to plow roads that are future public roads, but are as of yet undedicated. And the ruling is basically we can't, which then creates a problem for the residents who live on those roads. And they feel cheated because they're paying taxes and yet on what they assume was going to be a public road, and yet the town isn't yet plowing the roads. So we've looked at a bunch of different ways to resolve this. We're going through a couple different iterations. In this particular case, the road needs some work. There has been challenges from the developer in getting that road work completed. And being perfectly blunt, I don't have complete faith in their ability to do it correctly. So it's talked with our highway department, and they've got additional paving capacity left. And so what we're doing in this instance is they are going to have to put $160,000 into escrow. We're going to, as part of this dedication, we're going to take the road, we're going to mill it, top it, pave it. And then essentially we're going to pay for that from the $160,000. So that, again, there's no cost going out to the taxpayers. It's coming from the developer. But this road has been problematic for many years, and there hasn't been a good resolution. So what we thought was a good way to get it done. And again, to the residents who are living there, they don't want to hear about the fact that, okay, this developer has done some things in the improper order, and there's road breaking apart and stuff like that. They just want to have a road that works. So this was a way that we think we can solve the issue for those residents without, with the cost being picked up by the developer and not by the taxpayers. So.
And we anticipate that we'll be able to complete it before snow season this year?
That is correct.
That's great.
So do we have any assurances from the developer that they're going to put the money into escrow?
Yeah, so it doesn't happen until they put the money into escrow. In fact, the road is not dedicated without the money in escrow.
And is there a timeline or deadline for them to act on this?
It's like a week or two, I think, based on the paving schedule. It's coming up quick. I did see a bunch of communication back and forth from our finance team, our attorneys, their banking folks. So it is moving, but yeah, if they don't get it done in time, then basically this doesn't happen. Then we'll have to look at a different way to resolve the problem.
Okay. And is that in the resolution that it's dependent on the money in the escrow?
Yes, subject to the developer providing the town the aforementioned cash escrow deposit of $160,000, including providing any documentation that may be required relative to the same, all to the satisfaction of the attorney of the town and the town engineering department.
Okay, great. See it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 20-282, 2022 to authorize the purchase of a sidewalk plow, sidewalks department.
Second.
So this was originally going to be in they were considering it for next year's budget. Because of savings and or other projects that were delayed, there's actually enough money in this year's budget. In addition, if you know anything about the supply chain issues, if we want a plow for next year, we need to order it now. So they basically were able to allocate from the current budget and do this now instead of, again, as part of the budget process for next year, which then will also mean it doesn't need to be in next year's budget, which will help save money on next year's budget. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 20-283, 2022 to authorize the purchase of a holiday panel tree for the Holiday Lights and Magic Festival.
Seconded.
So I'll just note, because one or two people have asked, if you look at the list of quotes, the company we chose isn't the cheapest for the tree itself, but if you do the combined cost of tree and shipping, they are the cheapest. They are also the closest we have to local. They have offices in Syracuse, which is probably why their shipping is so much cheaper. So that's who they're located in Pennsylvania, but as I mentioned, they have offices in Syracuse. So if you don't know what a panel tree is, it's essentially you build a framework and then you put the panels upside for a holiday tree.
Yes.
It's for the holiday, we've been doing the Holiday Lights and Magic Festival. We did that last year. It was very successful, very popular, and they want to keep doing that instead of doing the Winter Carnival. The other nice thing is that the Winter Carnival used to include $5,000 worth of fireworks. So that's put a savings. The other activities were very much the same. Originally, we were going to do both last year, but by January, there was a significant spike in COVID cases. And so they decided not to hold the Winter Carnival. And especially having just held the Holiday Lights and Magic, going forward, they made the decision, let's just do the Holiday Lights and Magic Festival. So some of the, again, same thing, we were looking to potentially do this next year, but because they didn't hold the Winter Carnival, the money that was allocated to that carnival is available. We can do it at this year's budget, and by ordering it now, we can actually have it in place for this year's festival instead of it being next year. So I will tell you, the recreation department, the people who work on that festival are very excited. The kids who came were involved. The fire district provided, they brought Santa in on one of their essentially snowmobile things. There was a lot of really good, it was really fun event.
And
so
as a grandmother with two grandchildren there, my granddaughters loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can verify that is the real Santa.
Yes. My granddaughters will tell you that because
That is
Mrs.
the real
Claus
Santa
was with
and
them.
Mrs. Claus.
Right.
Mrs. Claus was with them. It had to be the real Santa. That's what they told me. So
That's it.
any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 20-284, 2022 to reappoint David Schwingle and Phil Mancini to the Board of Assessment Review.
Second.
And David, I'm sorry if I did bad with your name.
I was still second.
Any discussion? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Hirsch again. With regards to the Board of Assessment Review, I understand that there's only 2 members that you're reappointing. I'm not sure when the other 3 were appointed. I understand that it's a 5-year appointment, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Mr. Hirsch, as you know, you have filed a notice of claim with respect to this matter. The notice of claim has been received and the town is now represented by counsel on this matter.
Who is the counsel?
The attorneys have advised us that we are to refrain from comment on the pending matter, and any questions you may have, you can refer to counsel. Raul Martinez at Goldberg Segala.
How do you spell that?
So RMARTINEZ.
Wait, R what? R.
Why don't we do this? Contact, I'll leave, I'll leave the information with the town clerk. You can get
Or
from
do you have a phone number for them?
Goldberg Sagala, 295-8353.
And do you know what their business address is?
I do not.
You do not? But what is the last name? Goldberg?
The firm is Goldberg Sagala, Segalla.
S-A.
Segalla.
A-L-L, Sagala, Goldberg / Sagala.
There's
I can look them up. I can look them up.
Yeah.
So in other words, I can't ask anything about this at all.
None of the matters regarding that's in your notice of claim.
Okay. Duly noted.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow town board members, I have resolution number 20-285/2022 to authorize the supervisor to execute the First Amendment to agreement of lease for the Henrietta Town Court.
Seconded.
So our director of finance spoke with our landlords at the current facility where we rent space for the town court. I don't know why we're getting an echo suddenly. And they have a requirement from their bank. They have to enter into, they can't do month-to-month leases. They have to do a longer term. So we're extending for 3 years. However, we have the right to terminate the lease with no penalty, providing the landlord with 6 months written notice. So as we're building the new court, when we have a completion date, when we have a scheduled opening date, when typically you're going to have more than 6 months notice for that, we'll schedule that, we'll notify them. The other great thing is, even with today's rising costs, they've agreed to extend the term at the same base rent that we've been being charged. So that's good news. Thank you to the Lefroy. I don't know if it's Lefroy Builders, but the landlords, Rich Lefroy and his team, because they've been great working with us to make this happen so that the transition to the new court is much easier. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow town board members, I have resolution number 20-286/2022 to declare items surplus material in the town clerk's office.
Second. So you'll be seeing a bunch of these in the next week or two. We're basically getting all the stuff that the excess materials. In this case, it was the filing cabinets that used to hold up the old counter. But we're getting all the stuff off of inventory. It's being amassed in the old library. We're essentially going to have I don't know if you want to call it a tag sale, but to essentially offer up to the public the old desks, shelves, stuff like that, that is no longer needed. So we're going to essentially empty the library out, the old library out prior to demolition. So any questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye. Fellow board members have resolution 20-287/2022 to hire personnel and make the attached changes.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Safranek?
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner?
Aye.
Councilmember Page?
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca?
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz?
Aye. As we already acted, well, more specifically tabled resolution 2288, that concludes our resolutions. Do we have any additional discussion items or comments from the public? Coming up, as long as you understand the previous restriction.
Yes, I do. Some of this may or may not be within that purview. I've submitted agendas as I always do to each board member with the exception of the supervisor, just to be duly noted. I apologize for being late, but unfortunately, part of this is related to the fact I was tied up this afternoon dealing with the Monroe County Sheriff deputies in regards to FOIL requests through the county that has to do with statements that were made by certain town officials to the Sheriff's Department. This was foiled due to Supervisor Schultz's calling of the sheriff at the last town board meeting, or the one before that, on the 24th, I believe, of August, or whichever date it was. I wasn't sure that one, the one before, in which Sergeant Bay had indicated to me.
I will note that these are matters from your lawsuits.
Well, I at least need to talk about the fact that because this particular issue, wait a minute, this particular issue that I'm talking about is new information that I was not aware of. It's not in the notice of claim because I just got the FOIL stuff information back from the county the day before yesterday. And when I got the reports that I had requested, okay, the day before yesterday in the mail, when it was finally completed, and so what was in those reports and who had made those statements, which I was not aware of. And my point is that what triggered me to FOIL it was the conversation that occurred out in the hallway when you had called the sheriff on Miss Ruist by Sergeant Bay, when he said that he had seen my name on several reports. And I'm like, what reports? I don't know anything about this. So that basically prompted me to go and FOIL through the county, not through the town, through the county, those reports or anything, any incidents having to do at the town hall that I was unaware of. And so I was waiting for that to come back. It took some time, as you know. It took roughly until, as I said, the day before yesterday, for me to get the response back, for them to get the information. I got the reports. Okay. And unfortunately, Mr. Schultz, you are basically one of the persons named that made these false written statements, which I have the proof that they're false. It's new information I was not aware of. Okay. And then in addition to that, okay, apparently there is either some confusion or I don't know if Deputy Vincent Ray got it mixed up, but supposedly the Deputy Chambry, who supposedly was involved as the community-based service agent at the sheriff's substation, he basically is involved because somebody at the building code, the code department, which is in the other side, not at the clerks, right? Because they're over there. Apparently, there was some report that I was in there and that somebody basically made a report about that. But I have never dealt with the code enforcement area at all. The only people I've had any contact with throughout this whole affair has been the town board here, you, Mr. Schultz, as you know, right? And of course, the town clerk and the assessor. That's it. I have never had any contact with the code enforcement department at all. And apparently my name is associated with something with that, which is simply not true. Now that is being investigated as we speak. I am addressing these written false statements as we speak. I am going to be in touch with Captain Fay with regards to that. And I'm going to insist that charges be brought for making false statements pursuant to the penal law, which is very clear. If you make a false written statement, okay, to any quasi-official, a police department, police officer, it's right there.
Okay, you're pleading your legal case.
No,
this
I'm
is
not.
This is not the place to do that.
I know.
You have a chance to talk to our attorney.
I'm just making a point here to let you know that this is the case. Okay, so that people are aware, because I don't want a repeat of this sort of thing.
The problem is, this is your claim, and we can't address it. We can't look at it. We can't refute it. I find so many of your claims to just be outright false.
They're not. There's material.
Let me finish.
Oh, go ahead.
For instance, like your claim is that I was doing math without a degree. That's not a crime. That's not somehow wrong.
Not a crime. No, I never said that was a crime.
Whatever. Okay, you've made your point. Please sit down, because this is part of your lawsuit.
I have a couple of other things I need to address.
Well, then it can't be anything that has to do with your lawsuit.
Well, these do not have anything. I got a phone call. I'm addressing the phone call, and I'm addressing basically the formulas that you put up there on the screen at the last meeting.
That is in your notice of claim.
But I have foiled that, just so you know. And I'm pointing.
I emailed it to you. You don't have to foil it.
I don't have an email from you because I blocked you from emailing me.
Well, that's your own fault.
Well, I had to because that's another thing that was mentioned in this written report.
Okay, enough. Please sit down. No,
I have certain things I need.
No, you keep saying this has nothing to do with the lawsuit, and you bring up something that has to do with the lawsuit.
Well, what I'm about to say has nothing to do with the lawsuit.
You just said that 3 times, and it was something to do with the lawsuit.
I received a telephone call that I audio taped that I sent to the board members from the assessor. Okay, which is
this has to do with your lawsuit because you're talking about problems with assessment. Please sit down. 3 strikes. You're out. You're done.
I want to tell you,
you are done.
She is not to call me.
Okay.
Anymore.
No, we are done. Sit down. Do not make me call the sheriffs again. You are. Sit down. Under our rules, when you are being disruptive, I read you this notice. You said, I understand that. Point taken. And you have violated that 3 times running now. So please sit down.
All I want to say is
no, sit down.
What I have to say
sit down.
Nothing to do with the lawsuit.
You said 3 times you said that, and it all had to do with topics that are in this lawsuit. Sit down. Sit down. Go ahead. Any other public?
And you don't need to stand up.
Hearing no further comments from the public. Do we have any committee or miscellaneous reports from the board?
I'll do library board. Henrietta Public Library, they have a beginner book club meeting for kids K through 2. It's going to be every other month. It starts Thursday, September 22nd. It's going to be from 4:15 to 5. You don't need to read the book. They're going to read the book there. They're going to do crafts. They're going to do all kinds of really cool things. The first book they're reading is Surviving the Wild. September 19th, the library, it's going to be via Zoom at 7 p.m. The Nature of Oaks. It's going to be the ecological importance of oak trees. And don't forget about seeing Henrietta through your eyes. Your submissions are due by October 14th. We want lots of them, so we have a lot of tough decisions to make in choosing the winners, so please send them in.
Thank you. Any others? Go ahead.
Yeah, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Committee met last night, and they've been inviting in some guest speakers to help generate some ideas and some focus. The committee is continuing to recruit new members and those who are passionate about examining equity and diversity here in the Henrietta area. So if anyone is interested, please reach out. We'd love your participation. Go ahead.
I attended the butterfly release for honoring emergency responders at Ascension Gardens last Saturday. And it was it's always a wonderful experience.
It's one of my favorite events, and I was out of town. I was so sad to miss it. It's just so cool to do that.
I tried to go to the fire department commissioners hearing last night, only to find out it was moved to the 20th. I didn't know that. So I'll be going to the board meeting next Tuesday. School board, excuse me.
Thank you.
All right. A lot of events coming up through Parks and Recreation. This Saturday coming up, the Tinker Harvest Festival from 11 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Honey harvesting, cider pressing demonstrations, and live music. Saturday night at the Rec Center, there is Corvettes Under the Light. It's sponsored by the Rochester Corvette Club. All proceeds for this is going to go to a charity called IAC Kids, which provides financial assistance to families during their child's long-term inpatient, outpatient hospitalization. There's going to be over 125 Corvettes there, free admissions, concessions. And on October 8th, there's the Fall Foliage Run at Tinker Nature Park. You can register at runsignup.com. It's a 1 mile fun run. You can choose from the 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock start time. And projecting a little bit out, Make a Difference Day is coming up on October 22nd.
Thank you. For anybody who likes to play golf and wants to support scholarships for high school students, the William Walsh Memorial Golf Tournament from the Chamber of Commerce is Monday, the 26th. I think tee off time is at noon. There's the information is on the back page of the town newsletter, and also can be found at the Chamber of Commerce. So
I'd also like to add that the Rush Henrietta football team started off the season undefeated by beating Pittsford and then Fairport.
All right.
So
Yay.
Rush Henrietta and the Buffalo Bills are undefeated so far.
It's a good year.
Any further? Hearing none, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Hearing no objections, meeting adjourned.
Then we'll do it.